So thank you for coming out for our Planning and Zoning Roundtable. Just for those of you who don't know, not everyone here is actually with town government or a planner or zoner. A planner or zoner, a planning director, commission member, or zoning official. We've invited some of our outside partners as well because we figure community engagement is a topic that crosses whatever groups you're trying to engage with. So thank you for coming. I'm going to introduce Rebecca, but do you want introductions around the table?
Wait, I'll call in anyway. Sure.
Well, okay then. So I'd like to introduce Rebecca Sanborn-Stone, our trainer this evening. Rebecca's with Community Workshop, and they do a lot of work around the state and I think nationally on community engagement and really getting folks to think about how that's changed from the days where we'd hold public meetings and people would come. And that used to happen. Those town meetings used to be much more robust. So tonight we're going to try out a few things. We'll listen to some presentation, we'll work together individually or groups, individually next to each other, and then we will try and get you home before you go off. So,
great. Thank you so much to Bonnie and CVRPC for hosting and inviting me to join you tonight. This is one of my very favorite things, to come out and get to work with all of you who work directly on the ground and talk about engagement and help troubleshoot and figure out what you're doing great, how you can take some new ideas from each other and mix it up and do an even better job engaging the community. As Bonnie said, things have definitely changed in this landscape, and the planning community is not alone in being a little bit behind in figuring out how things have changed and how we need to catch up and do things differently, and what engagement even means today, because in a lot of senses it has changed. It's not your grandfather's engagement process. So tonight I'll share some best practices and some thoughts about how engagement is shifting, what works today, what different considerations we need to think about, and some creative out-of-the-box solutions that have been working for other places. This will be really interactive, so please jump in anytime with comments and questions and ideas and thoughts. And as Bonnie said, we'll have some time to work on real challenges at the end. We can see whether some of you have specific planning projects you want to think about for a few minutes, or we can make some up if we want to do that and troubleshoot. So with that, I do want to hear who's in the room, but before that, I want to ask you to just close your eyes and imagine for a minute that you have nailed community engagement for some project that you are working on. And you have some event or some project, some activity, something like that where it works really, really well. And in a minute, I'll have you all introduce yourselves and tell me what it is that you see. What does amazing community engagement look like today? Anyone want to jump in and go first? Awesome, thanks.
Bonnie Weninger, I'm Executive Director, which I forgot to, of the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission. I apologize for not introducing myself earlier. We have a forest and watershed type project with 3 communities, and I often imagine the result of that project when I think of community engagement, which is landowners talking to municipal officials about their hopes and dreams for their property, and the municipal officials thinking about how that might fit with theirs. So it's a conversation when I think about engagement.
Great. Why don't we just go around the room since nobody is jumping?
Okay. My name's Dara Torrey. I'm from Moortown, and I've just become the energy coordinator there. So it will be kind of new to reach out on this particular topic, and I'll be looking for ideas tonight. For me, I guess the ideal engagement is people show up and they leave inspired to do something. And we all leave inspired to do something with, like some pretty tangible next steps.
I'm Pam DeAndrea. I'm staff at CVRPC, and I do a lot of stormwater planning. And I think what I envisioned was a stormwater project where the community really wanted that project to happen in the planning process, but actually when it was implemented and put in there, having like a ribbon cutting and actually having community volunteers take care of, say if it was like a big rain garden or something like that, that they would actually be vested in taking care of it every year with weeding and new mulching, whatever is needed. And maybe some education around that. Maybe the school will get involved with education. So that's my envision. Haven't been there yet, though.
I'm Julie Potter. I'm from East Montpelier. I'm on the Planning Commission there. I'm also on the Regional Planning Commission. Rather than think about dream engagement, I'll talk real fast about the best engagement that we've done in East Montpelier. We were working on developing a master plan for East Montpelier Village, and we expected that at some point we'd like to be able to take our ideas and maps out to the public, but this isn't the kind of thing people normally show up for. So we talked to the elementary school and got them on board, and at quite a few of the different classes did either an art or an art and storytelling kind of project. And when the school had their open house, we piggybacked onto it to put all of our stuff out in the auditorium kind of area, and a lot of the kids' projects were also up. They had drawn maps, they had done model villages, and we saw more people than we'd ever seen come out for something, because we had a completely different sector of the town. We had young people with kids show up, and they are not the ones who normally come to your standard public meeting. And so it was very good.
Wonderful.
I went to that, and it was very good. And the kids' designs all had amazing numbers of candy stores and ice cream stores, and it was their fantasy village. It was very special.
That's good.
I'm Ginny Burley, and I'm with the Central Vermont New Directions Coalition, which is the prevention coalition with Department of Health funding for, started out as just Montpelier and the surrounding towns, and now we're all of Washington County, so it's just a lot of territory to cover. And one thing that I'm looking at right now is trying to educate all of our towns, 20 of them, about the new marijuana legislation that's pending, and let them know that in the legislation that's on the table right now, marijuana is legal in every town, unless they opt out with an affirmative vote. We're trying to get the legislation changed so that it's the other way, that you have to opt in if you want to do it. So I want them to know what's on the table so they can take whatever action they want to take to protect their community.
So I'm Carrie Saylor. I work with Green Mountain United Way, and we're the United Way that serves Washington County, but we also serve Caledonia, Essex, Orleans, and Orange County, so we cover a big territory. My title is Director of Community Engagement, so I didn't actually know what I was showing up for tonight exactly until I got here, but what we do, and part of my job, is to run our volunteer recruitment program for the communities and nonprofits that we serve. So we have over 65 nonprofit organizations that we work with throughout our counties, and a lot of corporate business partners and community partners to help recruit volunteers for those nonprofits for a lot of different purposes. But for me, success looks like a volunteer who is truly engaged beyond that initial excitement in a project and is really invested in the outcome, a little bit like what was said earlier, who can see the value in a project and want to stay involved in it after the really like flashy fireworks part in the beginning where you get to have an idea is over. Let's go over here.
Jonathan Delevrier, I'm a staff member at Central Vermont Regional Planning. One thing that I was thinking about when you had us do this exercise, when I was on the Planning Commission for the City of Winooski, the City Manager, Planning Commission had an idea of redesigning Main Street to make it more walkable, shops, places for lots of people to go and spend money and interact with the public. And the city kind of had an idea that they were going to move forward. And it was through the process of community engagement that ultimately completely changed the idea. So For an example, the original idea was to get bikes off of Main Street because it was a busy roadway. About 15,000 cars go up and down Main Street in Winooski a day. And there was a gentleman from Local Motion that came in and said, well, why don't we do protected bike lane going uphill towards Colchester, and then a sharrow going down? And the city ultimately said, yes, this is a great idea. And so it was a community engagement process where just one gentleman standing up, just kind of expressing his own opinion, completely changed the whole project, and that's actually now what's being implemented moving forward. So community engagement is huge in terms of the process and the outcomes that can come out of it.
I'm Ashley Andrews. I work for CVRPC. I'm having a real hard time trying to think about some community engagement. I've done a couple local hazard mitigation plans with some towns, and they seem to have a fair amount of luck in getting the community involved by doing surveys, and it totally changed their idea of what their direction was and how they were going to go about the plan. So that's kind of an interesting way of doing it.
We're getting some great success stories already, so if the rest of you haven't gone yet, no pressure. Remember, this can be your dream of what you think it should be if you don't have a success story ready.
So I'm Dan Courier, also with the Central Regional Planning Commission. I do the transportation planning right now, but in my past role, I actually did the water quality. And one of the engagement activities that I did is I brought pie to a meeting. And I actually talked about how, so engagement should be fun. That's how I envision engagement. And so everyone took a slice of pie, and that was everyone's share of phosphorus for the reduction that we needed to, remove from Lake Champlain. And so it was a fun little exercise, and a lot of people laughed, but, with a serious tone to it as well. So.
Hi, I'm Lee Catania, and I'm from the town of Orange. I'm on the Planning Commission there, and I'm also on the Regional Planning Commission. And I guess my definition of success would be if somebody showed up.
David Speck, I'm the interim zoning administrator for Duxbury, and I've spoken with a lot of people in Duxbury about zoning, and many have very strong feelings, but nobody comes and offers them and participates. There's a disconnect there, which I'm hoping to try to close.
Good evening. Apologies for being a little late. It was a little bit of a whiteout getting here, as I'm sure we all experienced. My name is Mike Rama. I work at Down Street Housing and Community Development here in Barrie. I am our Director of Advancement. So I oversee our community relations, our marketing, communications, philanthropy, kind of the whole 9 yards in that space. My role is new. I say new, but I'm about 10 months new still, but starting from practically scratch, not really, I don't have a pipeline of volunteers or engagement activities, so just excited to be here to learn about some new tactics I might be able to use.
Okay, well, I will try to be brief. My name is Mitch Oshesky. I'm from the town of Middlesex. I am the town's recreation director, zoning administrator, and I am on the planning commission. And my hopefully quick little story is, back in October, our town put together a community forum, which we dubbed What's Next Middlesex, and it was a day-and-a-half get-together where we tried to involve as many folks from town as we could. We did lots of things to we made it part of our fall harvest dinner to kind of entice people to come in, and then we tried to make it interesting enough to get them to come back the next day, and many did. We wound up at the end of this day-and-a-half session picking 4 projects that the community was excited about and wanted to see make happen. So we basically created 4 little committees, task force work groups, and we are working on trying to, we've got one group that is looking at creating a vision for the village and doing some economic development. Middlesex is a weird town that doesn't really have a town center. The village is far from the gathering point, which is the elementary school, which is kind of the community hub, but it's not near the village, so trying to figure out how to make good use of the town and kind of how to, move people around and get them where they want to go. But anyway, we've got a group of people working on trying to create a vision for the village. We've got a group trying to create an inventory of community spaces and events and kind of figure out how to publicize this sort of stuff. We've got another group working on trying to foster better communication between the various public bodies and the town and folks who've got kids in the school or kids who maybe don't have kids in the school but still have kids maybe homeschooled and want to kind of feel like more part of the town. And then we've got another group that is trying to develop more recreational trails in town. So wonderful. We've got a lot of stuff going on, and as a matter of fact, tomorrow night we're holding a get-together where all 4 groups have been kind of meeting independently, and we're kind of having a all-group meeting. We're trying to get people to kind of do a check-in and kind of say, hey, where have you guys gotten so far? What are your plans? What kind of pain points have you run into? What kind of things do you need a little boost with and stuff like that? So far, a lot of energy. It's pretty exciting.
Great.
I'm Alan Quackenbush from Duxbury, reluctant chair of the Planning Commission. Our previous chair had been on board for a long time, kind of burnt out and left in the middle of our zoning rewrite, so that went down to defeat this past year. And so we're trying to pick up the pieces, and we engaged the community, which many people said they didn't know about the zoning that was proposed, even though it was, I thought, well advertised. So we're trying again. We had a forum in December. We sent postcards to every registered voter in town. We only had 60, so like 580 postcards went out. We had 16 people show up. So that wasn't very good success. Our next attempt to get some input from the town is a town meeting, when we'll have more people there and put out a survey and hopefully get more input.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for sharing all that. So many great ideas and successes that we'll come back to, maybe talk about a little bit more, and challenges and themes popping up as well. I'm definitely hearing the theme that people are not showing up to meetings. And it was interesting because when I asked you all to imagine what really successful, amazing engagement looks like, actually, none of you said like 1,000 people showing up to my meeting, right? A couple of people said, you'd like to have somebody show up, that would be good. But nobody said this, and yet I think in the planning world and all the allied worlds, we can't quite let go of this vision somehow. We still think that this is success, and we're not doing it right unless we have a meeting and the whole town packs the hall. But they're not there to yell at us, right? They're there just to sit politely and listen and support everything that we have to say. So I'm going to ask you right now that if you are holding on to this vision at all, let go of it right now. Just give yourself permission to say, this is not what success looks like. This is not what good engagement is today. And quite frankly, it's not going to happen. So once we can set that aside and move past it, we'll spend some time tonight talking about what it is. I often ask groups to start, how many are interested in engaging the general public? So if you're in the room, how many of you feel like that's a goal for you? Okay. Sooner or later, everyone in Vermont's going to have sat through my sessions, and you'll know that's a trick question, because there is no general public. That's mistake number one, aside from expecting that they're all going to show up. No, there absolutely isn't. There are publics. There are many publics. And once you start breaking them down, you realize they're really all individuals. So we're used to this flood of mass marketing, sending out messages to the general public out there. We think it's just hitting everyone and hopefully a bunch of them will show up. In reality, that's not how it works at all. We are dealing with individual people who have individual lives and things they're struggling with and working on every day, and different things they care about and they're invested in. Even these mass marketers who put it out know that, whether it's the mail that we get in our boxes or whether it's digital today. It's actually not universal. None of them are targeting the general public, not a single one. They're investing millions of dollars in getting very specific, in targeting very specific groups, and making sure that every detail of what they send out is targeted to someone. It might not actually be you. You might be getting a mailing or marketing that's targeted to somebody else, but they're really thinking clearly about who they want to get. It's really about a mindset shift. So if we're honest with ourselves, I think a lot of what we have done over the years in engagement is rooted in this. It's all about me. I have this great plan and I need you to know about it. I'm having a meeting and I need you to show up. I have a project and I need you to come and help me with it. I have fill in the blank and I need you to do this for me, right? How many of you feel like, yeah, maybe that's kind of true about what we're doing with engagement? Resonating a little bit? We don't like to admit it, but it is true. The problem with that is that all of those general publics out there and individuals have the same motivation. It's all about them as well. And when you and your needs don't align with their needs, there's going to be a mismatch. They aren't going to show up. Or if they do show up, they're not going to do what you want them to do, or they're not going to care, or they're not going to get invested and stay invested in the long run. So the real secret in what we emphasize in our projects and work these days is flipping this around. Another thing you have to let go of really early on and say, from this point on, it's all about them. It's who these other people are, and really taking the time to understand them as individuals, as multiple publics and networks and groups, understanding what they care about, what they value, what they think, what their experiences are, what they need and want, how they can actually participate, what their reality is, and why they would even want to. And then as you get a little further down the road and start designing engagement strategies and activities and programs, it's all about filling those needs and about serving other people, not necessarily serving your own needs. So that doesn't mean you're abandoning your project goals in any way. In fact, the very first thing we're going to do is talk about how to get really clear on those. But it's about making sure that what you're asking and what you need aligns with real needs and real characteristics of the people you're trying to engage. So really, when we start talking about communities, we have to think about all these individual people who are no longer really the same. You know, if you were doing community engagement in Vermont maybe 150 years ago, your general public would look nothing like this. There would be a lot less diversity, and I'm talking about a lot of different kinds of diversity. When we think about why public meetings used to work, why everybody in town used to show up for town meeting, it's for a lot of reasons. Nobody really had anything else to do. It was, you know, the social event of the year. Everybody could kind of drop work. You didn't have multiple parents juggling kids and all over the place. Today, everybody's so different and has such different circumstances that you can't ever expect one engagement opportunity or activity to fit everybody. I'm not detracting from town meeting at all. I think it's still a great activity and really important for local democracy. But no matter how well you do it, you're never going to get everybody in the community there. You're never even going to get a majority of them. It's simply not going to happen today. So, top secret, engagement is all about them. And that's what we're going to focus on tonight. How to think through a real strategic process. So the beauty of this is we have so much diversity actually in the room in terms of what kinds of organizations and projects you're all working for. And all of the best practices and tips and ideas we'll talk about will work for any of you, whether it's housing or recreation or conservation or planning and zoning. So it's just about thinking strategically about who you are, what you want to accomplish, and how you can work specifically with those audiences. So marketing is kind of a dirty word in this field. I work a lot with nonprofits as well, and it's even worse with a lot of them. But in reality, that's a lot of what we're talking about. So do we have any closet marketers in the room?
Not closet at all.
Totally out in the open, huh?
Flat out.
Okay, so you probably know the 5 Ps. No, I'm not. We're going to put other people on the spot. Does anyone out there know the 5 Ps of marketing?
Is it people, 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 people? Is it one, two,
No, but good thinking. Good paying attention. So,
Is one purpose?
no, that's a good idea. Product, right?
Product.
Yeah, think about that typical marketing. Product. What else? If you're trying to sell a widget. Place. Price. Right? You're getting most of them. So product is number 1. Place, where you're going to sell it or market it. Price is number 3.
Is people one of them? No.
Promotion.
Promotion.
How are you actually going to promote it and spread the word? And people is the last one. So you all did pretty well on this. So when you're thinking about putting the word out about whatever it is you're putting the word about, your amazing meeting or your amazing planning process, you have to keep these in mind. But what I work with a lot of groups on is flipping this around a little bit and using a slightly different process called community-based social marketing, which is not about selling your thing that you really care about and trying to hoodwink all these people. This is about serving those folks. So this is going to reiterate a little bit of what I said originally, but really 4 pieces that we think about with community-based social marketing. So what is the really clear outcome that you actually want from this engagement? I was listening pretty hard when you all went around the room, and I was curious how many of you would have a really clear outcome. Anyone remember hearing one?
Somebody over there wanted someone to show up. I thought that was pretty clear.
So
I appreciate it.
now, here's the point where I start annoying you all, because I'm going to say, why? Why do you want someone to show up?
Why?
Yeah.
Because in our town plan that we just did, we said we were going to accomplish these goals.
Okay.
And those goals are going to be almost impossible to accomplish without getting the community involved in it. And that's where we're stuck, because we can't even get people to come to any of the meetings. We know that it's hard this time of year, but what we were, we're thinking of maybe, having some sort of events and this type of thing, when it comes to spring. But, we got 8 years now to get this done, and we're going to be, after 4 years, we're going to have a review to see how far we are on it. So we have to get started with it. And, we're just looking to how to communicate that, how to get people involved, and how to turn the project over to them, because I don't want to be doing this. I don't want to be doing everything. I don't want to be the person responsible for it or have the ideas for it. I want other people to do it.
Okay. So what's the real outcome? Is it getting people to show up?
What's the input?
People to volunteer.
What's input? Maybe. I'm not hearing a lot of input, though. I'm hearing volunteering. Is that it? You want people to volunteer to do things?
Or do you want to accomplish your plan?
Yeah.
Like accomplishing the plan.
I think he wants people to actually implement strategies in the plan.
Okay, so there's an
what I
actual
hear.
strategy or project. I know a couple, there was something around conservation in yours, right? Can you give us an example
There's
of one?
conservation, there's recreation, we have to have, what else is in there?
Yeah, that can.
Transportation, energy.
Yeah, there's
Energy.
transportation.
Forest.
And
So let's just pick
and
one.
energy conservation is
What,
the other one.
okay, so let's take energy conservation. What's the actual project or the actual outcome that you want to see at the end of the 8 years?
We don't have a project and we don't have an outcome on it.
Okay. So
Our-
here's
Our
a
goal
challenge.
is to get people involved in doing it and have them plan as to what the outcome is and what they're going to do with it. We didn't say that, here's where we want to be 8 years from now. We said we want to get a Energy Conservation Commission going and have them decide what they want to do.
Okay, so you want a group of people to come together and be an active Energy Conservation Commission
Right.
and want them to do something of their own choosing.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's the outcome, right? It took a little bit to get to that. You've got to be crystal clear on that before you start trying to engage people, because if you can't tell them what the outcome is, or you don't even know what outcome you're looking for, you're probably not going to reach it. How about others? Did anyone else hear a clear outcome that someone's trying to get to in engagement? I think I heard one from Pam, right?
Yeah, I wanted people to actually take stewards of the actual project once it's put in.
So say a rain garden
Yep.
is built, you
We-
want people to come back and keep it clean and
Come
keep
back,
it
keep it clean.
perfect. Okay, so there's an outcome. You want volunteers to step up and be really invested in a site and manage it over time. That's pretty clear. Carrie, you had one too, right?
Me? No, I don't get it.
No. Oh, I thought you said you wanted one volunteer to be really bought in.
Oh,
To do something, right?
But that's like a, yeah, sure.
That counts, right? That's a little bit like, please, you don't know exactly what the work will be maybe or what that volunteer will do, but you want one super engaged volunteer to be.
I recruit for 65 years, so it could be anything.
Fair enough. That's okay. You don't have to necessarily be clear on what's going to actually happen on the ground. You can focus on that outcome. But you have to be really clear on what it is that success will mean to you in the long run. So next up, who needs to act? This is where I see most groups falling down around community engagement. This is where the whole general public fallacy comes in. So let's say Pam wants 3 people who will be really committed to maintaining this new rain garden. Do you need to invite the general public to a meeting and try to get 100 people there? No. And doing so will be a massive waste of your time, and it won't work. Even if you somehow succeed in convincing 100 people to give up their evening, probably aren't going to be the right ones who actually want to stay involved and manage a rain garden forever, right? So this is where groups really need to shift their mindset. Get out of that thinking that you need to get as many people to a meeting as possible, and instead figure out what you need. If you need 3 people, then that's your goal. And if you need 3 people who are going to commit to managing your rain garden, then you need to think about, okay, who are the right people and what little pool am I drawing from? If you put yourselves in the mindset of those big mass marketing companies again, if they had a goal like that, they're probably not going to be broadcasting the same message to everyone. They're going to start tailoring and honing in and say, okay, who are the likely candidates? What are the demographics that are most likely to be my rain garden volunteers? And what kind of marketing imagery, what kind of messages would appeal to that particular demographic that I think is my target market? That's what we need to do a better job of as planners, right? Who do we actually think really matters for this particular project? Next up, what do they need? So the last question is still a little bit focused on the all about me business. Now we have to start turning that around. If we think about these rain garden volunteers, what is it they need to actually become invested and to go on and spend 3 or 5 years caring for this site? What do you think? If you can think about this imaginary volunteer, you manage to find this person, what are they going to need?
Knowledge.
Knowledge.
To be able to do.
Sure.
Like construct the rain garden and to maintain it.
Okay. What else are they going to need?
A feeling of success.
Yeah. Maybe being celebrated and recognized even. Tools. Tools from somewhere, whether they have them themselves or need them somewhere else. What else?
A bit of a drive to want to keep doing it.
Is some kind of motivation and drive. What else?
Maybe a clear objective.
Yeah, they need to know what it looks like to manage a rain garden and what you're expecting, right? Or else they may manage it one way and you look at it and say, oh, that's not at all what I had in mind. That happens. Anything else? A sense of ownership.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the biggest pitfalls sometimes is saying, I want all you volunteers to come and do this, but I'm going to control exactly how you do it, and you have to do it my way, and you can't really own it. That's a surefire way to turn them all away.
And they need to know why they're doing it. Yes. Not just the knowledge of how to. But
Absolutely.
why do I have to keep it weeded? It's all planned. Knowledge should be cool, right? But
Yep.
just to know what the function is and why you need to maintain it. Otherwise, you lose them.
So in terms of the real practicalities of going and finding these magical 3 people, no one's mentioned a couple of really obvious first steps that we need or that these people need.
They need to know you want them.
Yeah, and even before that, what do they need to know?
You exist.
You exist and a rain garden exists, right? People have to know that this is even out there and it's a thing. Yeah, they have to know there's an opportunity and it's needed. And just in terms of the most basics, you need to find people who actually have time to give, who have the resources to give. They need to be able to get themselves there. They need to be not struggling to put food on their table probably so that they have enough time to go and do this thing. Or maybe they need to be paid, who knows. So these are the kinds of questions you need to think about. Not everyone in your community is going to fit the bill. So you might as well not bother trying to reach everyone with this opportunity. And last, how can we help? So when you're thinking about community engagement, again, old mode would be maybe putting an ad in the paper. How else might you find these 3 volunteers? If you were doing traditional community engagement out of the 50s, what would you have done?
Posters.
Maybe a poster or flyer. The public warning is always great, right? Maybe not for a job, but what else?
I've seen sign-up sheets at town meeting, interested to volunteer, like that.
Yeah. Some word of mouth, right.
Websites.
So maybe some of these will work, but once you really understand your target market and the kinds of people you're working toward, there are probably a whole lot of other things you could do to get the word out, to make this appealing, to make it possible and feasible for people, that involves shifting that mindset and asking instead, how can we help make this possible for you? What can we do to make it easier? It may take a lot more of your resources to do that. There's no single bucket for how much you put into any of these things. It's all a gradient. It's all figuring it out. But if you invest really heavily up front in getting the right person and making it possible for them to do the job and do it well and make sure they know what's expected and why that's important, in the long run, I think you're going to save yourselves a lot of time and effort, right? Nothing worse than finding someone and training them and getting them set up, and then they're done after a month, right? And you have to go through the whole process over again. So this is what community-based social marketing is like. This is what it's like to think through one of those challenges and say, okay, instead of just sitting in my office and putting together the flyer and putting it out and hoping somebody responds to it who happens to be the right person, it's a process up front to really think through what you want to do, who are the right people, what do they need, what do they care about, and how are we going to serve them. So we'll walk through a few of these steps and then talk about some real challenge. So step number 1 is really about knowing your goals. And I always introduce the engagement ladder as an important step here too. We sometimes talk about engagement like it's a single thing. You're either doing it or you're not. Somebody is or isn't engaged. In reality, there's so much variation to what engagement can look like. And it's another place where you need to be really clear about what exactly you want and how exactly people want to be involved. Has anyone ever seen the ladder before? There are different variations of this. There's one used in education a lot. This one is from an organization called the International Association of Public Participation. And the idea is that engagement can go up these rungs of a ladder. So at the very most basic level, all you're really doing is informing someone of something. You might be informing them that a town planning process is happening. You might be informing them of what your new zoning proposal is. You might be informing them that you've built a rain garden. That's it. You're not looking for anything. They're not going to get involved. Maybe they're not even going to show up anywhere. The second level is consult. So at this point, you're actually asking for something back. You're taking their input, you're taking their feedback. No more than that. You're not promising to do anything with it. You're not involving them further. You're not expecting them to give any more or show up or do any more. Oops. There we go. The next one is involve. So this is probably a little more like what we hope for in a lot of planning processes in communities. We want people to maybe show up a little bit more, maybe be talking about it, maybe feel a little bit of investment, come back for other events. Collaborate is one step higher. So we don't do a ton of this. This could look like partnerships. It could look like working with another local group to organize an event or co-host something, or get their members involved in something that you're doing. And the very highest level is empower. This is where we're really sharing leadership, sharing decision-making authority, giving people the power and the space to go and do what matters to them, they really care about. I think there are a lot of cases where we think we are empowering people, and we're really a couple steps down that ladder. So that's an important question to ask yourself. If you want to be empowering folks in your community in some role, make sure that you actually are, that you're really giving them the leeway and the legroom to run and to do it their way, not necessarily your way. On the flip side of this, we can also look at where people are on these rungs. So at that highest level, you have the catalysts. You have the people who are going to go and make change themselves, who are ready to take the reins. I think this is what Lee's hoping for. So your question is, how do we create catalysts, if that's really what you want, people who will create that change? One step down would be partners. So maybe they're not going to go off and do it on their own. They'll help you if you tell them what you want, or you figure that out together. They'll do some work, and they'll have some shared ownership. That's pretty important too. Participants, these are the ones who will show up. They'll do what you ask them to. They'll take the survey. They'll come to a work party on a Saturday. But they're not really going to go a whole lot further than that. Contributors might just do one little thing that you ask for. At the very bottom, we have bystanders, the ones who really won't do anything. Maybe they don't know anything is going on. And I put / opponents. Opponents are sort of in their own little world here. They're really a different rung on the ladder. So if you are dealing with really controversial situations, we can talk about that separately. But the general theme for this is that, again, it climbs up, and often your goal is going to be to move people one rung up the ladder at a time. So if you have a whole community full of bystanders who've never really participated in your planning process and don't really know what's going on and don't know why they should care about it, don't expect that they're going to become partners and catalysts overnight. They're not going to immediately come out and say, yeah, I'm going to take ownership over this and be ready to go. Instead, think about how you can take that bystander and just get them to contribute. What's that first step in the direction to where you want them to go? You really have to get people used to it and coach them. And again, this is something of a cultural change. We've lost the knowledge and the ability to participate in local civics and local democracy the way maybe our grandparents' generations were used to. So for a lot of people today, just coming to a meeting is actually a pretty big hurdle. It might be downright terrifying. In fact, it might just be something they've never done before. I'm always amazed thinking back to a young woman in my community. So I live down in Bethel. She's now a very active community leader. I met her maybe 5 years ago. She had just moved to town, probably late 20s, and she said, I didn't even know I could go to a select board meeting. I had no idea the public was allowed to go to that, right? So sometimes it's that basic. You know, she's very well educated, intelligent, wants to be involved in the community, and just didn't know. So you couldn't look at her and expect her immediately to run for select board or anything like that. That would be totally out of the question. So think about how you can move people along. One really important thing is call to action. So in this digital world we live in, everybody is always looking for that quick answer. What is it that you want from me? Where do I click to buy, right? Where do I click to sign up or something like that? So for each of these levels, whenever you're reaching out or doing any kind of engagement, it's really important to give people that clear call to action. You need to know what your end outcome is, but you also need to be able to tell people what they can do today on the spot. If you convince them that this is important or fun or it's in line with what they want to do, what's the first thing they can do? And that also needs to be small. It's not, I'm looking for a rain garden volunteer for 5 years, will you sign your life away? It's like, sign up for our email list, and then we'll get you on board. In marketing, it's actually called onboarding, right? So it might be, come to one meeting, have coffee with me next week. Think about what that first step is that you can do for each of these groups to start moving them up. Golden circles is one other thing. We won't spend a lot of time on this now. It's something we could do at the end if we have a little bit of time, but I always encourage groups to do this. This comes from Simon Sinek, who has a fantastic TED Talk, if you haven't seen it. Check it out. So he has a wonderful and long explanation that I won't duplicate, but says that for the most part, corporations, and I will extrapolate to nonprofits and planners, talk about their work from the outside in on these circles. We usually lead with the what. So I'm a planner. We're having a planning commission meeting next Wednesday. I work on the recreation committee. We're doing a new plan and we're trying to upgrade the recreation center or something like that. Sinek says we really need to be starting with the why. If you lead with the why, you're connecting to deeply held, shared, common values for people. And then you talk about the how and what. So he gives the example of Apple. It says, you know, Apple happens to make iPods. When they came out on the market, nobody knew they needed such a thing. And if you look at any of Apple's marketing, they're not leading with their products. That's not what you see front and center. What they're doing is they're selling an image. Everyone remember the commercials with, you know, the cool young hipster guy and then the kind of stodgy guy in a suit who's Microsoft. You don't even see a product anywhere in that commercial because what they're selling is image. You know, be like Apple. We innovate. We understand what it's like to be different. We know you. We know what you want to be. Oh, and by the way, we happen to make iPads, right? So think about that with what you're doing. A lot of you talked about the what's. You know, we're revising our bylaws. We are planning this kind of meeting. We're doing this kind of event. It really has to be about the why, because we want a different kind of future for our children, because we want to protect our environment, because we value a strong local economy or housing for everyone, something like that. How? We're doing that by starting a new commission, and we really need you to be part of it. We need leadership from the community. What? There's a meeting next Thursday. Can you come? Right, so that should be the very last detail you're talking about. Whoops, back up. Okay, so step one is really all about figuring out what you want, what are the outcomes, what are you trying to accomplish through this project or engagement. Then you need to really focus on the community again. So who exactly do you need to reach? And there are a few steps to this that we'll talk about. So we do a lot of work with communities, planning engagement processes, and one of the first steps we always have communities do is a community map or network analysis. So if I say, do you know who's in your community today? What would you say? Sort of? Who do you think's in your community today? No one? Oh, what I'm asking? Yeah. Well, I was curious how anyone would answer that question if I asked you who's in your community. In a room full of planners, people will usually say, well, you know, we're about 50% over the age of this, blah, blah, blah. Or, 90% work out of town, or this sort of thing. It's all about demographics and things like that. What we encourage people to do is really think about networks. So how do people self-identify? What groups are they part of? What tribes, if you will? So there are a few different ways you can think about that. This is also really important when you think about trying to reach people. So if you've followed the directions and abandoned that idea of the general public at this point, you know that any outreach and marketing you're going to have to do will have to go through different groups that really have an identity and have communication channels and have a life of their own. So formal networks are really groups within the community that have defined membership. There's a way you could reach them. It might be that they're in the same place at the same time. It might be that they are all on a list together, something like that. So elementary students, you can count them. You can put a flyer in each of their folders to go home in the afternoon. That's a pretty formal network. PTO members, same thing. They probably have an email list, or you can show up to their meetings, whenever that is. Sportsman club, maybe. Conservation commission, same thing. This is a defined group. So a great step is to start by listing all of those, figuring out who they are in your community. Then look at the informal networks. This is the one we often forget about, but often the most impactful places you can start and some of the most efficient ways to reach the power brokers in the community, actually. So these are folks who may not all identify as part of the same group, although they probably do. There's probably not a list. There's probably not any defined membership. There may or may not be any way you can really reach them all together. So young families are a good example. This is notoriously one of the hardest demographics or groups of people to reach in communities. But a lot of them do know each other. You're just not going to be able to find them, and they are not going to show up at your meetings, I can tell you that right now. So where would you find them?
Schoolhouse.
Daycare centers. Parks, right? Some communities, like 12 p.m. on a Saturday, they all go to gather there together so their kids can play, or whatever time they've picked. It's not going to be publicized. You won't find it listed. The only way to find that out is to start asking around and finding some young families. Excuse me. Somebody had another good idea that I just missed.
Oh, somebody said parks, like
Parks,
yeah, or like a pond where everybody goes to swim in the summer,
Sure.
or skating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Their homes.
At their homes, maybe? Yeah. Grocery store. Yes. Look for the ones with sticky parts. Right. Green Up Day volunteers. In a lot of communities, that's kind of a close circle. Like the same neighborhoods go out and do Green Up together, and the same people volunteer year after year. Might not be a list of them. So if you wanted to reach them, what's the very best way you could do it?
Green Up Day.
Yeah, show up on Green Up Day, right? Stand there where they're handing the bags out or collecting them. But this is a pretty great informal network. You can be pretty sure that the Green Up Day volunteers are similar in certain ways. What would you suspect about them?
They all care about the environment.
Care about the environment. What else do they care about?
They're doers.
They're doers. They're willing to get out and actually get their hands dirty, in fact. They care about the community probably too. Care about where they live. They probably have Saturday mornings free, or at least occasionally, if they're out there on a Saturday morning. So you can start making these mental lists in your head, or even jot it down on paper. What do we know about this particular group? And then in the future, if you end up with some project where you need a certain kind of volunteer, you have that idea. So for Pam, if you're looking for that rain garden volunteer, this might be a pretty good place to start of all the demographics we're looking at. Mobile home park residents, right? Another informal network. They may not even really identify closely as a network unless it happens to be a co-op or one that's really getting organized, which would be great. But this is another important demographic. Another one that's probably not going to show up to your meetings, probably is left out of a lot of planning processes. And if you're concerned about equity and really giving people a voice, this is one to pay attention to. What's the best way to reach them? How might you find them?
Homeowners Association.
So if they have an association, that's a great place to start. But yeah, going to them. If you're talking about a park that does not have an association, you might be knocking on doors, or you might be standing next to the bank of mailboxes when everyone drives in, right? What else could you do? Anyone worked with these groups before?
What's the registry?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe finding someone who does work with them frequently and who would be a trusted entry point, right? Is there anyone who provides service to that park, who knows everybody, who would be willing to come out? So my favorite one that I put up, I pick on my own town a lot, is the Bethel Mafia. Probably you each have a group like this in your town, even if you don't know about it. So this, they may not, but they may actually. This is the group of 80-something gentlemen in my town who used to run the community and no longer do, but still like to get together for coffee at 7 every Tuesday and talk about it, talk about the glory days. So they're at the coffee shop at 7 every Tuesday, and they're still really power brokers, even though they're not on select board and they're not in the official positions anymore. They have a lot of sway and influence. They probably will go to meetings because they're of that generation and still will. Right?
And they watch the meetings.
They watch the meetings on public access, absolutely. But if you really want to get them invested and get them on your side, in our town, they might be inclined to disagree with some things that are proposed, and we know that. If you want to get them on your side, then showing up and making them feel like you actually want to talk to them and have a conversation is a really great strategy. You can probably get more accomplished in half an hour over coffee with these guys on a Tuesday morning than you could with 50 people showing up at a public meeting. So every town has its own. It might be a little bit different. Putney, I think, wins for the best name. Theirs is called the Viagra Club. And they meet at the gas station on the outskirts of town. So you have to figure out, who is yours, and where do they meet, and how do you get yourself welcome and invited, first of all, because that sometimes is a hurdle, too. So informal networks. And last are really the ones that are not connected at all. And this is the very, very hardest, but again, some of the most important people. So community engagement is often this battle for us. None of us have enough time and resources to do it really well. We've already established we can't reach everyone. And I am guilty as charged of doing this. We often say, well, we're going to do the best we can and get the most people we can, see what we can do. And almost every time, these last folks I put up are going to be left out of that picture. It's just the nature of it. It's because they are distributed. They're, by definition, not tied into community networks, not tied into communication channels, may have other barriers to participating. So if we look at some of these groups, patrons of a food shelf, new Americans, new residents to town, people who moved to town in the last couple months, what are some of the barriers for them?
I know in the city of Winooski, we had a language barrier for new Americans.
Yeah.
And getting them to read minutes or even know what is being talked about was a challenge. So the city is now translating the minutes and the meetings into, I think 10 or 15 different languages to try to promote that.
That's great. What else?
Your example that you gave, your new resident didn't know the standard rules of participation.
Yeah, so she was an out-of-stater. She wasn't even just new to town. She didn't know how things work in Vermont, that you can just show up to meetings and go and you're welcome, right? What else? Other barriers?
Well, that's great. Your transportation barriers or your time barriers or your
Yeah.
monetary, I have to get back to work at night, so I can't come to your evening meeting.
So I think one of the biggest challenges and moral imperatives we have as planners and folks working on this is to really address the equity issue. People who cannot afford to participate. And by afford, I mean they do not have the time, they do not have the money to get there, they do not have the child care. I hear a lot of grumbling from folks, it's not that hard to come out to public meeting. It's your civic duty. Everybody should make it there. And it's just not a reality. It is not even remotely possible for a significant proportion of the people in your community. It's really, really important to digest that and accept it. Even your example, it's amazing to be translating. I wish every town had the resources and
But then they don't have a
the forward
computer
thinking.
to see the
Exactly,
Yeah.
right. So think about new Americans who are scraping by, just trying to navigate this culture, never mind being out of state, being in a new country and trying to figure out how to participate, how to make ends meet, how to pay your rent, how to survive this cold snap, how to even shovel your driveway if you're not used to that. Having translated meeting minutes posted on a website probably isn't going to help you. That's not going to get you to a meeting, and it's definitely not going to get you to show up and volunteer for something. So it's really important to start putting yourselves in the mindsets of the people you're trying to reach, and think past the ones that you're doing a pretty good job of. Whenever you do have that extra 5 minutes to think about this stuff in the car, think about the ones you never manage to engage, who are the people who never show up to anything, because their voice is just as important. And if you can find a way to reach them, you will really reap the benefits.
Rebecca, I would add a sticky note to that hard to reach with single parents, because they can't just go to a meeting like this with somebody nor can afford to hire a babysitter or want to hire a babysitter to come to a meeting. So,
Totally.
it's not just young families, but it's, I have many single friends who are just, stuck at home and can't do anything.
Absolutely. This is really only the beginning. So if you really do your homework,
Oh my God.
this is what you end up with. So here's what a network analysis looks like. And you notice you can start clustering and grouping and drawing lines, because it's not just about identifying those groups. That's the first step. But then figuring out, how do we actually reach them? Who knows them? Who is trusted? So I used to work with the Orton Family Foundation a lot, and we did a lot of work in the Rocky Mountain West. And we had some really interesting experiences learning that things that work here in Vermont in the Northeast don't necessarily translate, right? We've done some really fun events out here and had great success with block parties, for example, in planning processes. Said, all right, we know no one's going to come out to a planning forum. Let's have a block party, and we'll have a local dog trainer come in and give free dog training advice, and we'll have a face painting table, and we'll have balloons, and we'll have the local police come and look all friendly. And we tried that in a community out in western Colorado with a significant Hispanic population. What do you think the reaction was? First sign of a police officer? Nobody came, right? So still important to figure out who could be that entry point. And out there, it turned out it was priests. That's who these communities trusted. So once we found that channel and said, okay, that's who we're going to be able to go through. That's who can translate our message into the language. And I'm not even talking actual Spanish language, but into the cultural language that these people speak. This is who can help us understand what would bring people out and what those barriers would be, what time of day would actually work, how far could they reasonably travel, what do they need to get there.
Where did you make that connection?
Talking to people. Yeah. So I think when you are embarking on a really big planning process, it's really important to start off by putting the right leadership group in place. So we often recommend doing a steering committee. And most communities are pretty good about this, but who's on your steering committees usually?
Same people who are always on the steering committee.
We call them the STP, right? The same 10 people. They're on everything. And for the most part, they're pretty similar people, right? Most of them are probably over 50 at least. They've been leaders for a while. They travel in similar circles. They all can read. They all have computers. They all have enough time and disposable income that they can participate in these things. So we often push communities to step back and say, who are the groups you want to reach? And now let's make sure you have a representative of that group on the steering committee, actually on it. So if you talk about youth, which most communities do, that means getting youth members on your committee. If you want to represent lower income people or new Americans or any of the groups that we're talking about, they need to have an equal voice and a say in shaping this process. So this is the last diagram I'll show on this. You need to get down to the level of thinking about individuals as well, not just groups. So we're just starting to work with another community in Vermont. And they said, oh yeah, we've done a network analysis, and sent me a list, and it had about 15 groups on it. And it said, churches and Conservation Commission and schools and things like that. It's a great start, and we told them that, but we need to go much deeper because that's not actually going to help them when it comes down to doing the outreach. What they need to know is, who am I actually sending an email to when I want to reach this particular group? Who's actually going to come to a meeting and help me with this? So think about people serving different roles in your community. Who would you say are the two most important people in this diagram here?
Susan's one.
hopefully you guys can see it. I know that.
Claudia.
Yeah. So Susan is right in the center, if you can't see. Claudia is connecting over to the outside. So Susan is really important because she knows everybody. So thinking about your work lives, the fact that you don't have unlimited time, if you want to get the message out to as many people with the smallest amount of effort possible, you tell Susan, and she's going to spread the word for you. Why is Claudia critical?
She's bringing in people who aren't otherwise connected.
Yeah, she's helping you reach those groups out there. So she's the priest from Western Colorado, right? So you've got to find those Claudias. They're a little bit quieter. They're not advertising themselves often enough. The Susans you can find, those are the busybodies, right? They run the post office window or they run the market downtown or something like that. But take the time to figure out who the Claudias are in your community, and that will really serve you. I wanted to say a quick word about psychographics. So do think about demographics as well when you're really thinking about your community. It's not silly to think about age brackets and other demographic characteristics. But one term that's coming up more and more these days is psychographics. Anybody heard that? It's really all about how we break ourselves down and classify groups based on psychology as opposed to demographic information. So I threw out tribes before. How do we self-identify? Is anyone part of a tribe here?
Planners.
Planners, okay. There's a tribe. What other tribes?
Scouts.
Like Boy Scout, Girl Scouts?
Boy Scouts, well, Scouts.
Scouts,
It's
yes.
the new term.
Right, Scouts. What else?
Fire service.
Okay. What else? Some of these aren't going to be defined again. So when I asked this question before, I've heard aging hippies. I've heard Red Sox Nation.
People who go to the library.
People who go to the library, right? So yeah, what's your cluster? You know, who are the people who are like you in the world? If you think about it, if you walk down the street or into the grocery store, how many times have you seen a person you don't know and said, oh yeah, like I know you, you're my kind of person? Have you had that experience where you just see someone, you can kind of know it? What are you basing it on?
What they wear, how they walk,
Yeah.
the kids they tag along with,
Right?
or tag along with them.
Totally.
They're putting in their shopping cart.
Yeah, what goes in their shopping cart? Are they buying the same products as you? I do this all the time. I mean, it's not something I'm really proud of, but I have my 8-year-old and my 6-year-old in tow, and if I see another mom who's struggling with a kid having a tantrum on the floor, I'm like, yep, you know, you're my tribe, I get this. But we all do it. And so that's really important when you're thinking about how to engage people or who the right people are for what you need in the community. Tribes are probably actually the most effective way to go. This is a better way to classify people and think about who you want to reach than, say, 60-year-old men, something like that. The downside is there's no list of them, right, usually, so it's harder to actually figure out how to get to them. So what goes into that? So lifestyle, how do people spend their time, activities they do, are there certain clubs or events that they're likely to go to? Experiences they've had. What have they done in their lives that shaped their worldview? Things like that. What values do they hold? What really matters to them about community? And biases is really important as well, especially as you're starting to think about messaging and how you reach out. Okay, step 3. Here's where we're going to start having a little fun. So now that you've really focused on what you want to accomplish and who you need to reach, this is where you really start narrowing down. So you definitely cannot reach that whole general public. You've picked one group of people. Let's go with Green Up Day volunteers, because that was a nice specific example. Now you start thinking about what kinds of community engagement activities or processes or steps can I do that will effectively reach that group of people, that will meet their needs, that will tap into what they care about, and have some alignment with what I care about. So a couple questions to ask. If you know what you want them to do, Green Up Day volunteers, let's say what we want them to do is maybe take ownership of one little park or garden area for the whole summer after they show up to Green Up Day, right? We want them to come, have a good time, and then say, okay, I'm going to get more invested. I'm going to move up to that collaborator level or something like that. So start by asking first, what are the barriers to doing that? We've already listed some of them, so I think a lot of what you all called out is here. Knowledge, interest, time, money, capacity. We talked a little bit about fear. Fear can actually be a pretty big barrier in a lot of ways. Then ask, what are the incentives? So what can actually get people over this hurdle? Lollipops work really well for my kids. If you promised them a lollipop every time they came and volunteered at the garden, they'd probably be there every week. Not so much for adults. So what do you think some of the incentives are that might help your Green Up Day volunteer overcome these barriers and take responsibility for a garden for a summer?
Food.
Maybe food, yeah, maybe vegetables. So thinking about that distinction even is really important. If you have your Green Up volunteer and you're going to offer a food incentive, are you going to offer pizza or vegetables?
Both are growing then. I was thinking the garden.
Probably
growing
pizza.
garden, please, but otherwise pizza, yeah.
Well, think about who that volunteer is, right? What tribe are they part of? Are they part of the grocery store tribe that's loading in the organic veggies and all natural, gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, everything? Or are they part of the microwave pizza, I'm just going to get food on the table for my kids' tribe? Because it really matters, right? If you're going to offer something, who are they? And which one is actually going to be the appealing incentive to them? What else could be an incentive?
Community.
What's up?
That they form their own community if you're getting several people together.
Absolutely.
They become friends.
Right, so community is a huge draw. We found that really strongly in Bethel. We've had a lot of community revitalization projects. Nobody shows up at planning commission meetings, but they spend hours and hours and hours volunteering on revitalization projects. And if you ask anybody who's really in the room, they're there for the community. It's because they lived in town and knew no one and were miserable until they found a way to tap in and get involved. And now they have a tribe. Right?
Well, I think an incentive can also be the outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if, for instance, in my community, the outcome of a revitalization project is going to be an actual theater that they're going to actually use that space for a theater. So the folks that used to do theater in another place that they can't do it because the fire marshal said you can't do it here, for them they have the incentive of, okay, we're going to have this space to do this. So the outcome itself can be the incentive.
Yeah.
I think that's part of why I've seen energy committees. They're really excited when there's a project to do. They're very project oriented. They get their project done. They're kind of spent, but they feel really good.
Yeah.
They drop off the committee. Somebody new's got to come on and revitalize it. But it's much easier to get people to participate on these project-focused things than on the we're going to write the energy plan type committee, because that's not as, it's not quite as fun, and the outcome is less tangible.
And longer or further away on the horizon. So you've hit on one of the biggest cultural shifts that's happening and one of the areas where we have not caught up as communities. I think across the board in the communities we work with, and we work across North America, we're seeing this. People are excited to participate in projects. Even the ones who will never show up to a meeting are happy to volunteer a lot of time at a project, but they do not want to be appointed to a committee. They do not want a standing obligation. They do not want an indefinite commitment. They do not want to write a plan. They want to get out and do something that will improve their lives. So think about that messaging. I'm thinking of Lee in particular here. You're looking for people to be on a committee. That might be the wrong ask in the beginning. You might want to flip that around and say, who has a project they want to do? What's something you want to see happen? And then you can always back into it, because more often than not, if somebody does a project, they're going to want to stay involved in some way. So maybe you just don't call it a committee, or you don't call it a committee up front. See how you can get them in. That comes back to the ladder. Don't take your people who are bystanders or barely involved and expect they're going to sign their lives away every Wednesday for the rest of their term. See if you can get them out to do one thing and get them jazzed about it, and then see what's the next thing they're going to get excited about. So project focus is really huge. Here's some others. Peer pressure is really undervalued as an incentive, I would say. This can be pretty big. So actually dragging your friends and your family and your buddies along with you is pretty big. Or finding that connector who can drag 15 of their friends and buddies out. Giving people help. So in a lot of cases, people want to do something, but they don't really know how, or maybe they need something to make it possible for them. It might be having transportation. It might be having childcare. It might be having tools available. But figure out what that is. In some cases, people do need an actual reward or an incentive to make it worth their time to do it. If it's a business, can you give them some publicity? Can you give them exposure to the community or something like that? Some people really do just want that gold star. So actually, we work with a lot of communities and say, like, do silly awards at town meeting every year. Just recognize people and celebrate it. We actually have a printable on our website if anyone wants it. It's called Local Heroes. Just little half sheets of paper. You can print them out. We've done it at public events. You can hang it in the library. We've hung it at town meeting. And people just write who their local hero is and why. And it's so simple and so positive and affirming. People just love the opportunity to recognize folks who are doing great things in the community and get that out there. Sometimes it's just convenience or information. You might schedule something for one time and get no one, and if you scheduled it for an hour later, you get everyone, just because the time is off. You know, if you miss the youth soccer window by half an hour on a Saturday, you'll get nobody, but if you do it after it's over, you'll get plenty of people. One other thing about design here, and then we'll talk about some activities. So 4 things you need to think about when you actually have your idea and you're going to put it out there. So you need to think about the message and make sure you're speaking people's language. Again, so this is back to committee. If you say, I want you to join a committee, maybe that's not the right message. I want you to do something amazing for energy in the town. That works. So what you're saying really does matter. How you say it matters. So we're pretty locked into our same methods of communicating usually. You guys have to put out the word about a planning commission meeting. How do you do it?
Buy the book.
Be honest.
An agenda.
Post it.
Post the agenda.
Front Porch Forum.
Okay, if you're really forward thinking, you're putting it on Front Porch Forum. Maybe on the town website, if it's up and running, right?
If there is one.
If there is one. Yeah, we're not so great about this. So if you really want to reach the right people in your community, you have to figure out what communication channels they're actually accessing and how to get to them. And chances are it's not your town website. Might be Front Porch Forum, maybe not. What other communication channels do people actually use in your town?
Facebook.
Yep. So Facebook's a whole different issue. We could have a whole evening conversation about social media. My general advice to you on Facebook is assume that you will reach no one unless you are paying money these days. It can be a valuable tool, but you have to pay to play. What else?
General store owner.
General store owner. Yeah, so that might be your very best bet, right? In our community, if I really want to know what half the town is thinking, I would not do a survey. I would go spend 15 minutes with Brad Andrews, who owns our hardware store on Main Street, and he would tell me. It's that simple, so if you find that right person. So that's the, who are you reaching out to? How are you connecting with them? What channels are you using? So you could spray paint a message in graffiti. You might reach some new people, in fact. That might be what they're not expecting. So think beyond all those communication channels that you typically use and think about how else you could spread the word. And then this is the trickiest one of all, the experience of it. So you might put up the same poster and have two very different, or have people react to it in two very different ways, depending on who they are and how they experience it. And that's what really takes a lot of finesse. That's a little bit like that Colorado example that I shared with you. If you send a message that we're going to have police officers at our block party in Vermont, probably going to have a fairly positive reaction from people because we know our small town cops, and for the most part, they're good folks. Send that same message in a city, send it somewhere else, send it to a community of color, and you're going to have very different experience of that message. All right, practice time. So here's our potential Green Up volunteer. What do you say to her to get her to come out? And how do you give her the message?
Ask her what she cares about.
So starting with a question instead of come and do my work for me, right? Mm-hmm. There's a good way. What else? What do you think she cares about?
Well, she's got an apple on her desk, so ideally she likes fruit, right?
Okay.
Maybe being outside, picking apples. I mean, make some relationship there.
Okay. You know, she reads.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe health foods, so you might rather have fruit available that day instead of the pizza, donuts. How could she get a message, do you think? Well, she has a computer, so you know you could reach her digitally. Maybe she's on Facebook, right? So these are the kinds of things to think about. How about them? You want them to come out for Green Up Day. What do you need to do differently?
Talk to one of them directly.
Yes, word of mouth, or pick up the phone.
Yes.
What else?
Senior center.
Senior center.
Go to the senior center.
The knitting class?
Go to the knitting class, yeah.
Yarn shop.
Would your message be different?
Absolutely.
What would the message be for them? Why would they want to do this?
To socialize.
Socialize, stay active, right? That would
Maybe
be
it's
healthy.
something they're doing with their grandkids.
Yeah, right. To find out what do they love to do or what do they want. Grandkids, multi-generational activities are huge. That could be a great reason to do it. What else?
Maybe you have them work on the lunch for the volunteers rather than on the horribly dirty bottles.
It's a different option to what they could do, absolutely. Right, recognize maybe they're not going to be the ones climbing up into the upper tiers to prune branches and things like that, but make sure there are options for how they can participate and really be involved. Yeah. What might some barriers be?
Transportation.
Transportation.
Physical limitations.
Yeah. So if you are asking them to get down and weed the flower beds, you might want to have benches there or something else to make it easier to think about what's really going to be a barrier. How about this guy?
You can park his motorcycle next to it.
Clear out all the weeds, so there's plenty of motorcycle parking. Awesome, Dan. What else?
Security.
Security? Okay.
He could, protect everybody there.
He's while the crew's cleaning up the middle of the roundabout with all the flowers, he's on the outside taking care of traffic.
There you
So
go.
nobody gets hurt.
Oh
Yeah.
no, you guys, he's the guy who's gonna clean up the most trash,
Yeah.
and he's gonna be so proud of it, and you're never gonna see him coming.
Yeah.
It's always, when we do projects, we do a fair amount of projects with that, and it's always really funny, the people like this who show up and seem really tough, like they're beyond all of that environment.
Stand on the edge, yeah?
Yeah, and there you, I mean,
the
or you
biggest
get
bag
into
of
flip
trash.
burgers, they're always burger flippers, you know, or they're the ones who.
Oh, so he's
they
running
do,
the
like,
barbecue.
challenge.
Running
They
the
need to,
barbecue.
Throw down the challenge, like,
Throw down the
who's
challenge,
gonna
exactly.
throw up the trash bag?
Yeah.
Maybe he has a truck.
Who needs to carry something really heavy
Yeah.
from point A to point B?
So I want to go back to Carrie's first point because I actually always throw this one in as a little bit of a red herring, right? What I'm asking you to do, or what I've asked you to do over the last hours, to kind of stereotype a little bit, start drawing some conclusions. And you have to do that just for efficiency's sake when you start breaking this down. But don't totally stereotype because he could be a member of the knitting club too. He could be your best Green Up Day volunteer ever. Don't totally write people off, don't jump to conclusions. Going out and talking to them is the very best way to go. So come back to Pam's advice. Sit down and say, what do you care about? What do you love about our town? What do you want to change? And then connect that to what you're doing and give him an opportunity to work on that. Help him find a place.
He may love to plant flowers.
He may love
You
to
don't
plant.
know that.
He may be the best gardener in town, right? And have a whole greenhouse full of prize-winning orchids. You never know. Okay. So I'm going to run through a few tips really quickly and some just quick ideas of fun engagement activities, and then we'll talk about some of your projects to give you some time to plan. So one, really important, just make it sticky. One of the biggest problems I see with a lot of planning or planning documents and posters and advertisements that come out, it's just like paragraphs long. It'll be a poster with Times New Roman font size 12 and 3 paragraphs that people have to read, and they're not going to do it. So when you think about your messages that you're putting out, posters, calls to action, make them really short, easy to remember, recognizable, and something that will stick with people. So add local flavor, absolutely. You're not going to find the same poster designs work in every community. Years ago, I was working with a town in Maine on a planning process, actually, and they needed a poster for something, and they sent me one of those Times New Roman posters. And I was straight out of grad school, and I made it look all slick for them and sent it back. It was really beautiful. And they sent it back again and said, we can't use this. Anyone guess why? Too slick. Yeah, they said the community will think this is done by some fancy out-of-town consultant, and they won't want to come. So know your local community and know what's going to resonate there. What words are in and what words will turn people off. What colors or things will say, yeah, this is us, or it's not us. So design the experience. This is one of my favorites. If you are into this kind of thing and want to read more, I would highly recommend a book called Nudge, which is about behavioral psychology. And it's amazing what small changes in the actual experience or physical environment or messages, how you present options, will change the outcomes. So they did a number of studies, or point to a number of studies in this book. One is that if you get a group of people together to discuss a controversial issue or something, and you put them in a room like this versus a room like this, where do you think they'll actually reach agreement? Here. They'll actually reach agreement much more if you put them in a kindergarten classroom than if you put them in a boardroom. So just the design of that setting sends a signal that we're supposed to be adversarial. Whereas here, they send the message that, oh, we're actually supposed to get along and share and collaborate. So those little things matter a lot. They found if you serve hot coffee instead of iced coffee, that makes a difference. Hot coffee will be more likely to bring people to agreement. All kinds of great examples in that book, things about the order of the choices you present people with really matters. They have a great example in cafeterias. If you put the apples in front of the cookies, radically improve healthy eating outcomes, things like that. So you can do all the best marketing and great work. If you do one of these small little nudges, that might have just as much impact. Here's an example, right? We expect people to come to town meeting and be engaged and excited and be informed about everything. Do we make that easy for them? No, we don't. This is not how to design the experience to make it easy for people to participate and do what we want them to do. So think about that when you're putting out your town report. How could you actually design it in a way that gets you to the outcomes you want and helps people engage with it the way you want them to? Could be as easy as increasing the font size so that people can read it. That's something we did in our town report. Make it fun. We're skipping kind of to the gold standard here. This is one of my favorite examples from the Fun Factor, put on by Volkswagen actually. They said, we want more people to take the stairs. So what are the traditional planning ways you could make that happen?
Close the escalator.
Yes.
Sorry, that was obvious.
It's a little bit brother. You could write a whole plan about it. You could do research about it. You could post signs that give statistics about how much longer your life will be if you take this.
Can we hold a charrette? We want designs.
We could. We could have a charrette. Or you could turn the stairs into a giant musical keyboard so that every time you walk in a step, it plays a note. And what they did, in fact, find was that not only did people take the stairs, but they went up and down and up and down and up and down because it was so much fun that they just wanted to play the keyboard. Right. So the more you can make things fun and enjoyable, you're going to find people are going to come out. All those barriers like time just magically go away if something's a lot of fun. Here's an example in Vermont, actually in Richmond. We were working on planning a couple years ago. This is the hazard mitigation plan meeting, and it's not really that boring. It was a pie competition and chili cook-off, and then we did a simulation game about resilience. So people came in and did that instead of listening to a presentation about hazards. How to make sure no one shows up. So if that's your goal, you guys probably know how to do this. Put the warning in the newspaper, do the 2-hour lecture, and schedule it on Super Bowl Sunday, right? If you don't want to do that, if you do actually want people to show up, maybe think a little bit beyond that warning because no one's going to see it, and really think about how you can change it up and make sure it's convenient for people. So, there's that meeting notice. So here's an example for Gardner, Maine. They knew nobody was going to come to those meetings, so they scheduled this celebration instead. Come for good old-fashioned fun, carnival games, art, food, music, things like that. And if you read the fine print, oh, by the way, maybe there'll be some planning conversations there too. Right. So if you are in that club and you're having trouble getting people to your meetings, and you don't want to go door to door and go directly to them, throw a party instead of a planning meeting. How to get people to come again is really important because we lose a lot of people meeting to meeting. So make it really interesting, use the feedback, end on time. It's better be good. How to train and educate. So a lot of our meetings are still 3 minutes at the microphone, standing up. If I had one magic wand and I could do away with something, it would be the public hearing format. Instead, where people really learn and engage and have civil conversations, it's totally different formats. It's small table conversations. If you have any kind of controversial issue you're struggling with in your town, small group conversations are the way to go. Do not let people get up in front of the entire room with a microphone if you can help it. Games, activities, all these things actually help people learn and process and bring it together. Just sitting and listening to folks is not good. Personal impact, so make it really relevant, make it about stories, get people up, bring in art and kids. I love the example of the kids in the school. Make it easier on yourself by piggybacking on other things. So again, people are not going to come to your meetings, and you could spend 10 hours organizing a huge community forum and get 16 people there. If you spent those same 10 hours going around to other events where people already are, like the basketball game and town meeting and the school art fair, you would get so much more feedback and engagement than you did in the first place. And a few ideas for you. So we've talked a little bit about the usual communication channels. Don't abandon them. There's still a role for newspapers and chalkboards and websites and things like that. But think a lot about the unusual ones. So where are the places where people are not used to being bombarded with messages, where you could surprise them and catch them off guard and actually get some messages through the clutter? Beer coasters are a great way to go. Restaurant placemats. Tape something to the top of a pizza box. Put a flyer into every library book that gets checked out. Send it home with the water bills. Lots of opportunities. Tabling again. Go to the events. Go to the places where people already are and make it look fun and exciting. Pop-up parks. So here's Laconia, New Hampshire. This is a planning commission survey, believe it or not. Is this like any planning commission survey you've ever seen before? No, right? So think about how you can get that out. You could send it home. I pick on Bethel again. Bethel just did one, and my husband's on the planning commission, so I can really pick on them. They said, all right, well, this year we're going to mail it to every household, but we won't include a return envelope or stamp or anything like that. People will mail them back, or they'll drive them to town office, right? Any guesses as to how many they got that way?
20.
I won't embarrass them by saying how many, but I will say they were, I think, all over 60, age 60. It was a lot of work. It was like 6 months before they said, okay, maybe we really ought to do an online survey, at least, and give that option to people. If you really want to hear from people and hear from the ones who aren't even going to do your online survey, set this up and set it up in the places where those groups go who you aren't going to reach in other ways. Chalkboard walls can be really fun. So some of you have probably seen Before I Die Before, which is really just a fun engagement and placemaking activity. But you can do all kinds of chalkboard walls to gather input and feedback and get people thinking and get them excited about a place. So I brought a few examples. These are one of my favorites. I wish this was stickers. This was designed by Candy Chang in New Orleans. Vinyl stickers, they do not damage anything. You can stick them on windows and light poles and whatever you want, and let people write what they wish it was. So much more fun than a survey. Everyone will stand around reading them and get excited about it and say, what is that? And you'll get that buzz you're looking for. And then maybe if you follow up with a meeting, people will show up. They'll be interested. Multimedia contests are great. So get people out there taking photos and talking about what they love or what they want to see. Text polls are another interesting way to go. We do this a lot as an option. And people always say, oh, not many people are going to take advantage of that. Nobody is really going to text. They text, right? A lot of people in your community will definitely text, and they will not answer an online survey. They definitely will not mail back a paper survey on their own, that kind of thing. And even if you're not getting huge swaths of people, it's important to duplicate these efforts. So still do the paper surveys for people who aren't on text and internet. Still do the online version, but add this as an option, and you'll reach a whole segment of the population that you won't reach.
Under 60, probably.
Under 60, under 18, in fact, will text. Surveys are a good way to do it, but there's some creative ways that you can make surveys more fun and more interesting than the typical ones you do. So if you are thinking about a survey, think about how to make it more accessible and more interesting than what usually goes out. Think about people who can't read the typical questions. Can you make it visual so that people can vote and have a chance of participating even with a language barrier? Can you put them in interesting places? The poster on the side is one that we used in a public meeting. So instead of having the 3 minutes and a microphone, we had an open house, and people could go get a plate of food and mingle and talk and give their opinions as they walked around on posters that were up. Take it on the road. So if you have a presentation or an idea or you want feedback on something, go to groups. Again, you could take those 10 hours you'd spend organizing a public meeting and spend 10 individual hours with different groups in the town, go sit down with the Mafia or the Viagra Club, and you will get much better feedback. One-on-one interviews can be great too. So this is one of those hurdles. People always seem to think so that quantity is better than quality. If I get 100 surveys back and people haven't spent a ton of time on it, it's still better than one really in-depth interview. And it may not be the case. You need to ask yourself that question. One really great interview with someone in the community could easily be worth 100 surveys. Workshops and demos, one of my favorite ways to engage people is just get them out on the street. If you can get a group of 20 people to go and walk your main street with you and talk about what they see and what it's like and where they stumble over the sidewalk cracks and what they would like to see in that spot, you're going to get them bought in. They're going to come back and want to participate in projects that come out of that. Tactical urbanism is a big one. So this is a super wonky term for a really fun idea. This is all about doing incremental change, trying things out and being experimental. So instead of writing that 5-year plan and then raising $100,000 in funding to go implement it and build it, it's about taking an idea and going and testing it and seeing if it works. Paint on that bike lane in Winooski and try it before you actually invest in it and build it for real. It definitely makes some big changes. So Springfield actually tried that this year. They had, I think, some pretty big transportation investments, bike ped investments downtown that they were going to do. They were ready to just go implement the plan, and last minute said, why don't we try a pop-up version of those? And it turned out the community hated them. So they got that feedback ahead of time. They maybe spent a couple $1,000s instead of a couple $100,000, and they could change that plan and really make sure they got the right one before they made that big investment. People will be very happy if you save the community a couple $100,000. Block parties and festivals, again, just make it fun. Throw a big party and people will come, and you can ask them planning conversations and you can sign them up for things at the same time. If you do summits and forums and focus groups, again, make it fun. Give people an opportunity to talk to each other and get together. And the last one I'll finish up here is maker activities. So get people actually making and doing tactile things as well. Remember how different people are. That goes to how they like to participate and offer ideas. Some people may not be verbal. They may not want to talk. They may not want to write, but they love to make. We did an activity called City as Play. I have a giant bin of recycling and odds and ends and pipe cleaners, and bring it to meetings for adults or kids and say, build the park that you want to see, or what do you think we should do on Main Street? And it's fascinating to see people just working in tactile ways. So I'm going to stop there. At the end, I can show you one example of a great project that has embraced some of these themes, I think. But for about 15 minutes or so, let's do a little bit of workshopping. So I am going to throw out 2 options and see what you guys want to do. I have some worksheets that represent kind of the first couple steps of these processes. One option is you could work in pairs if some of you are actually working on projects together or working on similar things, or by yourself, and think through a few of these steps, and then we could see where you got or troubleshoot a little bit. So this is thinking about a project, what's your why, really articulating why you're doing it, the outcomes you want, and then identifying a couple of very specific audiences or groups that you think you wanted to do. So there's option 1. Option 2 would be just to have some free-form troubleshooting and talk about challenges and things that you're all working on and want to cover. So why don't we just do a little vote? How many would like to do option 1 and actually work on projects a little bit? Nobody. They like option 2. I thought that might be the case. So I'm going to send you home with these. If you want to work on them, you can do it. I usually do this as a full day workshop and go through all the steps, but this will get you started if you want to do it. So with the rest of our time, yeah, let's just throw out some ideas. Anyone have a challenge you're really struggling with and want to get ideas on? Or questions, anything that's bubbling up for you? Yeah, Jim?
So this is going to relate to my scouting,
Awesome.
So in Scouts, we need the kids to come and participate, but we're finding that it's actually on the parent side that we actually need to encourage more. Kids are super interested in makerspace stuff. That's what we do, right? But getting the parents and staying engaged, right, or even come to that first meeting is really hard. So I'd love some advice there. So
I'm going to throw it out to everybody else. What would you do? You need more parents to get involved in scouting.
Yeah.
Encourage carpooling. Because sometimes I would love for my kid to be able to go, but I'm still at work. I can't get them there.
Yeah.
So, you're a transportation guy. So much of the time, kids don't participate in stuff because they can't get there.
And beyond encouraging carpooling, actually make a list available to parents and let people know who are like.
So you guys should know I already did this. So next. No, it's really funny. I'm working on it literally right now. So this idea came to me like 2 weeks ago, and I started working on a carpool list and sent the email yesterday. And so it's great. This feedback is like, yes, okay, so I'm on it.
Is there a way to have like a welcome party for everybody so that the parents get to know each other? Because often the kids all know each other, but the parents don't know who the other parents are. So if the kids are super psyched, you're like, who do you want to go hang out with? What are you talking about? who owns them, what people. So,
Cool.
yeah.
What's in it for the parents?
Yeah.
I know what's in it for the kids, what's in
Yeah.
it for the parents,
Well,
other than getting the kids out of the house?
so I mean, the easiest answer is that at the Cub Scout level, it's supposed to be a family activity, so the parents are supposed to be engaged as much as the kids are in the activities. So like building the craft or leading the activity, right? So they're supposed to be engaged. But we find a lot of parents just sit on the sidelines even though we encourage them to be engaged. And so a lot of times there isn't much for them. So yeah.
Do you give them an opportunity to learn about something new and then share it with other people? We've done that in programs where if people are not raising their hand and asking.
Yeah.
I want to teach, like I really love nature and I want to teach this thing about plants. Like, well, here we'll have a learning session and bring somebody in, you can learn about this stuff and then help share it with the kids or something.
Yeah. That sounds great.
So I think you're all on the right track asking all of these questions. That's always where I would start with something like this and go back to some of the steps we talked through. So you've clarified the outcome. You want parents, you don't just need to show up, you want them to actually be really involved and get into the making. So my first question is, who are the parents, who are the tribes or groups, or what kind of parents also want to be doing making?
Yeah.
And are able to come and be part of making.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think? How could you find it? Is there any kind of classification or way we could hone that down instead of the general pool of parents in a community?
Who already does things with their kids? Where are the other places kids and parents hang out?
Mm-hmm.
And you say there's a lot of sideline sitters, so could that be out of fear? So how do you make people feel comfortable if they're just sitting on the
Mhm.
sidelines? How do you make them feel comfortable to participate? Some people, it's hard to take that first
Yeah.
step.
So maybe you do have the right ones there. There's just a barrier keeping them from getting involved the way you want them to. So I would ask them that question.
Yeah.
Just sit down and, do it informally, just a couple of minutes after, hey, I noticed, blah, 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 you were sitting out. Or we're really trying to figure out how to get more parents involved, or how do you want to be involved? Like, what do you want to do? For some of them, maybe they just want to sit on the sidelines. Sometimes I am so burned out that if it's an hour, I can sit and watch.
And that's cool because we have leaders. That's why we have leaders.
I'm a maker, so ordinarily I would love that, but I could be more of those parents.
Or I'm taking my time to sit back and actually have an adult conversation with other parents that's not about work and not about the kids and not about... So if they're on the sidelines talking to each other...
Go ahead. Was it clear to the parents when they signed their kids up that that was an expectation?
The answer is, I don't think it has been in the past. And so I think identifying outcomes, is going to be a key as well.
If you start with the why, Dan, and you start with this investment of time your kids are making and we're making, could be so much better if you just were able to give us X amount of time in the coming year, and we have like 5 different ways you can do it. And just we ask parents to commit this minimum level, and you have a lot of options. You could get some engagement, I would think.
It's always fun to ask them what they're good at or what they're passionate about or what they love. I mean, I found a guy who knew everything about mushrooms and would take the kids up in the woods and tell them what not to eat and what There's all kinds of skills out there that people don't know are important or valuable. They don't think their kids would be interested.
Yeah.
So it sounds like what you presented us to us as one engagement challenge is really probably about 3 or 4 different ones. You have the parents who are already attending, that you want to get more involved, and you have one challenge to figure out what's holding them back or what they might want to do, how they might want to participate. Then you have, the potential pool of parents out there who would be so gung-ho, they don't even know it exists. So how do you reach those folks? And maybe there's another group that's on the fence. They know about it. Maybe they came once, maybe they didn't, something like that. And you need to figure out how to get them coming back. What would make it possible? Is it a transportation issue? Is it a scheduling issue? Is it something else?
Scheduling is definitely an issue. Soccer, hockey, baseball, basketball.
Right.
So,
you really need to treat these as individual challenges. If you are going to, really take a planning approach, I would say take 3 different sheets and map them all out separately. Think about this pool of parents who's already coming and design a strategy that you think would help you reach them. And it might be just information gathering for a while. You might not have enough information to do that for a bit. And then take the other one separately. But great example.
Thanks.
Yeah. Who else has one?
I have an unsexy one.
Right on.
So we did our planning, we're moderately successful in public engagement, and, for a little town, it wasn't too bad. We actually had people show up at public meetings and at our hearings, and they weren't angry with us. That was terrific. So now we're implementing it. We're writing zoning. We're changing our zoning. There's nothing that people hate more than change, particularly when it changes what they can do with their piece of property. And it's going to look like a significant change. We need to inform, we need to consult, looking at those levels on the ladder, those are things, and then we need to not have them come after us with pitchforks.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
All right.
I mean, it's not a, we want you all to come and get involved in this with us. I mean, this isn't something that's fun to do.
Yep.
It's important, but it's not fun. And I'm just not certain, how do we do engagement on something that doesn't have hands-on components to it?
Yeah. So let's and let's give ourselves a little head start and take the approach we just took with Dan and break it down a little bit. So what are the questions you would ask to really start categorizing some of the different challenges here in different groups?
What are the changes? So how will it impact me? Maybe they'll see they won't lose as much as what they think they will.
Think they might lose, yeah.
Well, I'm curious, are you looking for people to participate? Because you already said we want them to be part of it, but we don't want them to do anything.
No, we want to inform them. We want to consult. We are going to be looking for feedback on it.
So you just want them to
But the conceptual stuff of we care about protecting, working lands, that part's already been determined through other activities. Now we're trying to figure out, we're taking the best practices on how to do that. We're going to take it out to the public and say, so you told us this is important. How about this? This is what we're proposing to do.
So you want feedback on what you're...
We're looking for feedback on the draft zoning.
Thank you.
Julie, what about starting at the end? Like, this is when residents get to vote. This is going to be when it's presented to you. Maybe it's town meeting. And here are the points along the way where you could help decide what gets presented for voting, and just kind of make it connected to when things are going to happen at the end. Because and for us, with our zoning change, we wanted to do subdivision regulations for the first time. So it was the select board and their public hearings that actually generated the most attendance and interest. And that all happened because we knew what we were working towards, which was town meeting. So we kind of went backwards.
So if I was to look at success on this, is we have a lot of people come out to an informational sort of thing where we explain what we're doing and we answer questions. And then we have a lot of people come out to something where it's much more consultative. They can tell us what they like, don't like, whatever. But by the time we get to doing the public hearing, success for me would be nobody shows up except for a couple of people who say, I'm not thrilled, but I understand what you did and it's okay.
Yeah.
That would be success for me.
So let me ask you a couple things. Is the whole community going to vote, or is it a hearing that will just be passed through?
This is likely to be the select board.
Okay. So that's really important information to have up front. Do you need a majority of people voting to actually approve it, or do you just need people to not show up at that final hearing? That's a very different thing.
Right, that is huge.
That's really critical.
Yeah. Is it a
The second thing I would question is, do you really need all those people to show up to meetings? Or are there other ways that you can get to them and inform them and get their feedback? So you're kind of starting with the assumption again that I need to have a meeting for my process and you all need to show up and participate. And that may not be the way to go. You might find different ways. In this case, the zoning, controversial planning and policy decisions are kind of in their own world when it comes to engagement, and there are certainly things that have worked for more communities and real pitfalls around it. I think Dara's right, just showing a timeline, showing people the opportunities they have to get involved can really help tamp down the anxiety. Because I think fear and anxiety are some of the worst things that crop up in these processes. So the more you can do to satisfy people that they will have a chance to be heard, it will be a transparent process, it will be a fair process to lay out the groundwork and say, here's why we're doing this, here's what you've already told us, and here's how we know that. Here's exactly how it will impact you. Here are the number of properties we think will be impacted. Here's the potential change in property value. Put all that factual information out on the table. And do not make it look like that town report page I showed you. Make sure it's clear, graphics, depict it visually, do visualizations or maps, things like that, so that it's easy for people to understand. Think about a 2-minute video or something that you could put out, ways to convey this information that will be different for people. The other advice I would give you way up front is start, again, thinking about those audiences. So you still don't need the general public to show up for meetings, and you don't need to go to the general public. So when you think about your goal of having people not show up at that final hearing, how would you hone in on the right people to engage for this process?
Who does the select board need to hear from so they vote yes?
Who do they need to hear from? Who is going to influence their decision? There's a great, easy exercise called power mapping, where you just do a couple axes and you start plotting individual people in terms of how much influence and power they hold in a process. And figure out who are the 5 people you absolutely need to go to and get on your side to do that. And the other category I would say is who's likely to show up at that final meeting? Because they're angry in particular, right? And if you can figure out who they are and go directly to them and work with them up front, even one-on-one or in small groups, that's going to head it off.
One of the things I'd like ideally out of this is that it's not so much that nobody really shows up, but if we've been able to get the message out, this is why, this is how it impacts you, but it's not that they're not showing up because they didn't know or that they don't care. I think for something like this, we're likely to be impacting every, property owner in town, one way or another. I think they will care, but I want it so that they understand enough not to be afraid of it and to think it's okay.
Yeah, they feel confident in not showing up. Absolutely. I think the question is how you get them that way. And there's probably a lot of ways you can do it that don't involve expecting them all to show up at a meeting. And it might mean a few different strategies. Do you have an active opposition group, whether formal or informal?
We don't yet.
Are you expecting you might have one?
I don't know.
Yeah. So I think that would be a good early question. Are there, is there either an organized group or are there just individuals in town who you think might be likely to be opponents? And I would start with them in terms of engagement. How can you make them part of the process? Could you invite them to be part of a little planning team to plan out some conversations or discussions? This is one, I mentioned small group discussions are way better than the 3 minutes at the microphone model. Planning and zoning, absolutely, right? So if you are planning public meetings or conversations, doing small group discussions with somebody trained or at least primed to be a facilitator and a neutral person at each table is by far a better approach to go. You'll have much richer conversations, people will actually listen to each other, and you can get good feedback that way instead of just having people yell at each other. Other thoughts? We have a lot of planners in the room. What's worked for you?
I heard you say loud and clear, speaking to what Lee's commented for Orange, where they wanted people to show up, needing to have something to engage people. So I wondered if we could brainstorm some things with Lee about how can we engage the town of Orange to get them excited to participate? What is a project or project ideas?
We were thinking, just what we did, it's been about 10 years ago, I guess. We built a pizza oven out of just clay and stuff, and we had the kids in the school do it, and we had a great time doing it. Everybody loved it. We had every Friday, or I think it was every other Friday, we had pizza and the town showed up, and it lasted a year and a half maybe, or 2 years, and then it just got old, okay? And so we didn't do it anymore. I don't think we've done anything in the town since then to get, people involved with it at that level. And it's very difficult to do because our town is so spread out. It's in two really sections that you can't even get from one to the other without going through other towns because of the mountains in the middle. And I'm at a real loss as how to get people engaged with it. So we're just going to try some things at town meeting. We're going to try to put up some displays of what we've done with our town plan, and have some tables there and just say that, here's what we're doing with our conservation, here's what we're doing with our recreation, here's what we're doing with our energy and stuff, and trying to get people involved that way. I don't know.
Stuff going home through the elementary school kids maybe to get parents' input, like the young families' input, I wonder?
Well, that's another thing that we've got a problem with, because we just combine the schools.
Oh,
Sure. Do you have a library?
Yeah.
No.
So Lee, I have a question, and you're, I'm sorry if I'm not remembering this correctly, you want people to come to a committee to generate ideas. So you don't have tangible ideas for what that recreation plan is going to deliver. You just know that the town thinks there needs to be development in the rec area.
There has to be some recreational activities to get the town involved and get the kids, something for the kids to do. And, how we...
And that was all decided through a planning process or through a master plan or something? Is that?
We redid the town plan, and one of the things you have to look at is recreation, and we have very little recreation in the town.
Mm-hmm.
So we said over the life of the plan, we're going to develop a recreation committee, and they're going to decide what they need to do. Are they going to, rehab the ball field and make it usable again? Are they going to build some trails? What are they going to do? I don't know what to do.
So I think you have to start with asking people that to get them engaged, by asking them, what does recreation mean to you?
Yeah.
Because some people it means fishing, some people it means trails, some people it means...
That's what we were trying to do at the, we're going to try at the town meeting and just put out there, what do you think we should do? And ask people that, not give them any ideas, as to what we think they should do.
That's where those crazy chalkboards come
Yeah,
in, where it's like, what does this mean to you? Like, what crazy, and some people put, recreation means riding a whale, and other people are like, it'd be really cool to have a baseball field, and so you can generate that kind of idea on a group level.
I went to this Conservation Commission meetup once, and what she did was put, that paper that just rips off and has a sticky on the back of it that you can just hang up, and she titled them, and people went around and used the little colorful sticky notes and wrote, I can't remember what the specific questions were, but it was, she put them in, she compartmentalized things, and then you could write on your sticky note and put it on that poster. So if you had a big poster that said recreation, and then just asked people to put on the sticky note what that meant to them, and then you had one for energy and one for conservation, whatever it is you need people to care about, and then, ask for contact information. Give me your name and email too on that. That would be a way for you to collect sticky notes and then have something to work with as you leave. But you could even, not necessarily at town meeting, if you wanted to do a spaghetti dinner or a pancake breakfast or something like that, and feed people and and then get that feedback at that event too, or revise the pizza thing.
That was our second choice.
Yeah, just so bring them in with something, and then that would be one way to get their feedback. I don't know.
Great ideas. I think all this thinking is right on track. Let me make a couple small tweak suggestions, because I think sometimes we get into the area where the little details matter. So sticky notes are great. If you have a table in the back and the flow of the room is not such that people go into that corner, you could sit there all day and maybe only have a couple people come right on your sticky notes. If you have a blank sticky note and no one's writing on it and there's no energy, no one will look at it. So if you just seed a couple of ideas, that's enough to send that visual signal and prompt it. If you are concerned that people might not get back there, think about how you can really encourage them to do it. So the sticky note idea is great. One thing you can do at town meeting is put 2 of them on every single chair and get the moderator, or you go up at the beginning and say, your ticket out of this room is putting your sticky notes on the board. And then you'll get everybody to do it. Right? So that little detail can be the difference between very small amounts of feedback and massive amounts of feedback from people. Framing the question is really important. So what does recreation mean to you is a fascinating question. You get really interesting ideas. Think about what outcome you want. Do you want that kind of philosophical, real mix of ideas, or do you want to get to projects really fast? And that might be my inclination for you. I'm channeling Mitch's comments at the beginning a little bit, and some others. Julie's, I think, that if people are so project focused, and what's really going to engage folks when they're not in the habit of engaging is tapping into something that will make a meaningful difference in their lives. So if there are people out there who really want a trail, they'll get on board with helping to build a trail right now. They might not want to join a rec committee. So you might consider framing a question, what's the one thing you want to see done in recreation in the next 12 months in this town? What's one improvement? Or if you had a magic wand, what is one thing you would give the town for recreation? We had a lot of success with this in Bethel, so I've mentioned this a little bit. For those of you who don't know the community, we really had fallen apart, very much hollowed out leadership that actively shut down involvement from anyone in the community for a long time. Main Street was hollowed out, we had no gathering places, not much going on, and then Tropical Storm Irene hit. And people said, this is not the town we want to live in, but we did not have infrastructure or staff. You know, in many ways, Orange sounds similar. There was no pathway for people to get involved. So small groups just started gathering, and one that I connected with just put up a flip chart at a fall festival that said, what do you imagine for Bethel? Really channeling your question. And people wrote a ton of wacky ideas. But the key was, then we got together the next week and said, okay, which one are we going to do first? And we just picked one and went and did it then. Did it that weekend. Cleared out a little lot on Main Street. And it didn't matter that it wasn't the whole community. It didn't matter that we didn't have a committee. We did one. And then we picked 3 more and said, okay, let's put these out to a vote and see which of these 3 people want us to do. And they voted. Some of you, I'm sure, have heard of Bethel University. Others have not. Is anyone who hasn't heard of it? This big? Couple, okay. So this is the winning idea out of those 3 that we picked off a flip chart. And now we are entering year 6. It is a free community pop-up university. So during the month of March, anyone can teach a class on anything they want, and anyone else can take classes for free in the community. It just has to be in the town. And that first year, we said, it's a wacky idea. We don't even know if it'll work. It had about 18 classes. People liked it, so we said, we'll do it again. We got 100 registrations. Year 4, we were up to more than 1,000 registrations, drawing people from 55 towns, 77 classes. So this is the power of just rolling with an idea, just asking the question and taking a risk and taking a leap. And be ready to experiment and roll with that some more. Every year that we do this, we say, okay, how else can we now use this beast to do something else great in the community? So one year we said, well, let's really put it out to all the community groups that are trying to recruit new members and trying to educate people and invite them to teach classes. So our little resilience group said, all right, we're going to offer 4 classes. We're going to teach people how to use chainsaws and recognize invasive species and recruit Conservation Commission members at the same time. Right? And we said, all right, and how can we use it to support all these new businesses that are growing up? So when you get something that works and has energy, start asking those questions. What more can this do? How can this have more benefits? How can this reach different people? That kind of thing. And you'll find that it just grows. So that brings me to my very last recommendation. I've heard you mention the pizza oven before. And if this is something that has energy and that people love and remember, I would build on that. Bring it back. Have a big pizza party. Channel that nostalgia and something that the community loved and cared about. Even if it's only one, you don't need to commit to ongoing pizza parties or anything. Just start. Just get people together, ask some questions, and see what they want to do. Okay. So I'm going to end there. This has been a total pleasure. I'm happy to stay around and chat more if anyone wants to brave the snow for a few more minutes. And always happy to answer questions for folks as well. So thanks so much for being here.